What happens when a 56-home run slugger gets just a 2-year, $34 million deal, and your team says no thanks? Folks, let me ask you something that should make every Phillies fan sit up and pay attention. When was the last time a 25-year-old who broke Japan's single-season home run record couldn't even secure a long-term contract in Major League Baseball? When was the last time a player with that kind of raw power, the kind that makes highlight reels and sells jerseys, got passed over by contender after contender until the Chicago White Sox swooped in at the 11th hour? This isn't just another "the one that got away" story. This is about the Philadelphia Phillies front office making a calculated, ice-cold decision that might just save their championship window from imploding. And right now, on this December evening, with the hot stove still burning and fans dissecting every move, we need to talk about why passing on Munetaka Murakami wasn't just smart, it was absolutely essential. Let's set the scene properly, because context matters here. Munetaka Murakami isn't just any Japanese prospect. This is a guy who obliterated Nippon professional baseball's single-season home run record with 56 bombs in 2022. 56! That's the kind of number that makes general managers wake up in cold sweats, dreaming about what those moonshots would look like at Citizens Bank Park, a hitter's paradise where baseballs go to die happy deaths over the right field wall. The Phillies have been circling the Japanese market like sharks for years now, looking for that transformative talent that could put them over the top. They've made offers, they've done their homework, they've shown genuine interest in tapping into that pipeline of elite talent. So, when Murakami was posted this offseason, you'd think Philadelphia would be all over it, right? A 25-year-old power hitter entering his prime, available for bidding, with the kind of upside that could theoretically slot right into the middle of a championship-caliber lineup. But here's where the story gets fascinating, and where the Phillies' restraint becomes a masterclass in modern baseball operations. Let me hit you with some statistics that should make your blood run cold if you're a team trying to win a World Series in the next 2 to 3 years. According to ESPN's Jeff Passan, and this is crucial information that apparently scared off most of the league, Murakami's strikeout rate over the last 3 seasons has been at least 28% in each campaign. Now, you might be thinking, okay, so he strikes out a bit. Big deal. Plenty of power hitters strike out. And you'd be right to think that if we were talking about a proven MLB commodity, but we're not. We're talking about a player transitioning from NPB to MLB, where the velocity jumps dramatically, where the breaking stuff has sharper bite, where the command is exponentially better. Here's the kicker that should terrify any analytics department. Murakami's 72.6% in-zone contact rate would have been the second lowest among qualified hitters in Major League Baseball in 2025. Read that again. The second lowest. This isn't a guy who struggles with pitches outside the zone. He's struggling to make contact with pitches right down the middle of the plate. Think about what that means when you're facing Jacob deGrom's 101 miles per hour fastball or Spencer Strider's wipeout slider. Think about what happens when you're in a playoff series against the Dodgers or Braves, and you desperately need someone to put the ball in play with runners in scoring position. That 72.6% contact rate isn't just a red flag. It's a flashing neon sign screaming buyer beware. Here's something that doesn't get discussed enough in these international signing conversations. The velocity gap between NPB and MLB is massive. While Japanese pitchers are incredibly skilled, some of the best in the world, the average fastball velocity in NPB sits several ticks below what you see in the American League or National League. Murakami crushed 56 home runs against pitching that, while excellent, wasn't regularly throwing 97 to 99 miles per hour with late movement. He wasn't seeing the kind of high-octane stuff that's become standard in MLB, where even middle relievers are touching triple digits. The transition isn't just difficult. It's historically been a graveyard for players who rely heavily on timing and bat speed. And let's be brutally honest about what the Phillies saw in their evaluation. A hitter whose swing and miss tendencies in a slower environment suggested he'd be absolutely carved up by MLB's elite pitching. When you're already striking out 28+% of the time against 93 miles per hour fastballs. What happens when you're facing 98 with cut and sink? The Phillies didn't need to guess. They've seen this movie before. They've watched international signings flame out spectacularly when the velocity jump proved too much. They weren't about to commit significant resources, both financial and roster spots, to a player whose fundamental approach at the plate screamed high-risk gamble. But wait, it gets worse. Because even if you could somehow convince yourself that Murakami's bat would translate, that the power would be enough to overcome the strikeout concerns, you'd still have to deal with the defensive nightmare. Murakami isn't known for his glove at third base. In fact, most scouting reports suggest he's a liability there, the kind of player who turns routine ground balls into adventures and makes your pitching staff age in dog years. The consensus among experts? He'd have to move to first base in the majors. Now let's pause here and think about the Phillies' roster construction. They have Bryce Harper, a former MVP, a cornerstone of the franchise, a player they're built around manning first base. They're not moving Harper. They're not benching Harper. They're certainly not creating some awkward platoon situation at first base to accommodate a defensively challenged Japanese import with massive swing-and-miss concerns. So, where exactly would Murakami play? Designated hitter? The National League doesn't use the DH as frequently, and when they do, you want that spot for your aging stars or injury-prone players who can still rake. You don't use it for a 25-year-old who should theoretically be athletic enough to play defense. The positional inflexibility alone should have been a deal-breaker, but combined with everything else, it's a non-starter. Here's where the Phillies' decision-making becomes even more impressive. They recognized they needed power, they acknowledged the swing-and-miss risk, and they went with Adolis García instead. Now, Garcia isn't perfect. He's got his own strikeout concerns, his own boom-or-bust tendencies. But here's the critical difference. Garcia has already proven he can handle MLB pitching. He's been there, done that, got the postseason heroics to prove it. The Phillies knew exactly what they were getting, warts and all, rather than projecting what a Japanese slugger might become against superior competition. It's the difference between a calculated risk and a blind gamble. Garcia represents the former. Murakami would have been the latter. And when you're a team with championship aspirations, when you're operating with a finite window before your core age is out, you simply cannot afford to waste at-bats on science experiments. The front office looked at both options and said, we'll take the known commodity with MLB experience over the mystery box from Japan. That's not being conservative, that's being smart. Let's talk about who did sign Murakami, the Chicago White Sox. You know, the team that just finished with one of the worst records in modern baseball history. The team that's in full rebuild mode, that has nothing to lose and everything to gain from taking flyers on high-upside, high-risk players. The White Sox giving Murakami 2 years and $34 million makes perfect sense for them. They're not trying to win in 2025 or 2026. They're trying to find building blocks, to discover hidden gems, to take swings on players who might develop into something special. If Murakami flames out, no big deal, they weren't competing anyway. If he figures it out, they've got a potential star on a team-friendly deal. But the Phillies? They're in a completely different situation. Every roster spot matters. Every dollar spent has to contribute to winning now. They can't afford to dedicate playing time to a player who might need 2 years just to adjust to MLB pitching. They can't wait for Murakami to figure out how to handle high velocity while their championship window slowly closes. The fact that Murakami's market dried up so completely that he ended up settling for just 2 years with a rebuilding team tells you everything you need to know about how the rest of the league evaluated him. If he were truly a can't-miss prospect, if the power were enough to overcome the concerns, he'd have gotten 4 or 5 years from a contender. He didn't. That speaks volumes. Here's the uncomfortable truth that Phillies fans need to understand. The window is open, but it won't stay open forever. Bryce Harper is 32. Kyle Schwarber is 31. JT Realmuto is 33. Tree Turner is 31. This core is still elite, still capable of winning it all, but Father Time is undefeated and the clock is ticking. When you're in this position, You cannot afford to make mistakes. You cannot afford to waste resources on players who might not contribute immediately. Every move has to be calculated to maximize your chances right now, not 3 years from now, when half your core might be in decline. The Phillies front office has done an exceptional job of understanding this reality. They've been aggressive when it made sense, signing Turner, extending Harper, adding pieces that fit their competitive timeline. But they've also shown remarkable restraint when the fit wasn't right, when the risk outweighed the potential reward. Passing on Murakami is exactly that kind of disciplined decision-making. It's the front office saying, we know he's tantalizing, we know the power is real, but we also know he doesn't fit what we need right now. That's not being cheap or scared. That's being ruthlessly focused on the ultimate goal. In a sport where teams routinely overpay for potential, where general managers get seduced by tools and upside, where the fear of missing out drives irrational decision-making, the Phillies chose a different path. They looked at Munetaka Murakami, all 56 home runs and tantalizing power, and said no. They said no to the strikeouts. They said no to the defensive limitations. They said no to the velocity concerns. They said no to the positional logjam. They said no to the risk that simply didn't align with their championship timeline. And you know what? They're going to be proven right. When Murakami struggles to make contact against MLB pitching, when those strikeouts pile up, and the power doesn't translate as cleanly as hoped, when the White Sox are giving him regular at-bats because they have nothing to lose while contenders are glad they stayed away, the Phillies will look prescient. This wasn't the sexy move. It wasn't the headline-grabbing splash that gets fans excited on social media, but it was the right move. And in a few years, when the Phillies are still competing for championships while other teams are dealing with the aftermath of expensive mistakes, this decision will look even better. The Philadelphia Phillies won't regret passing on the first Japanese slugger to sign this winter. They'll celebrate it as the moment their front office chose wisdom over hype, substance over style, and championship reality over fantasy baseball dreams. If you understand why sometimes the best moves are the ones you don't make, hit that like button, and let me know in the comments whether you think the Phillies made the right call. Because in a sport obsessed with what could be, sometimes the smartest teams are the ones who focus on what actually is.